The group text landed at 6:14 a.m., between my first coffee and the quarterly all hands. "We think it's best you step away for now," my mother wrote. My father added, "For optics." A second later, my aunt reacted with a single red heart and an attachment I'd been waiting 11 years to see. They thought they were pushing me out. They didn't know I run compliance, and that today, I was opening the very door they just locked. My name is Sloan Mercer. I am 31 years old, and I am the head of ethics and compliance for Northvale Systems. My office is on the 31st floor, a 10 by 12 glass box suspended over the architectural gray of Grayford. The glass is sound-dampened, triple-paned, and UV-coated. It renders the 6:14 a.m. sunrise not as an event of color, but as a slow, clinical increase in ambient light. The air is recycled, filtered, and chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, smelling faintly of industrial carpet adhesive and ozone from the server racks one floor below. My desk is a single piece of white composite, cold to the touch. On it sits my laptop, two 24-inch monitors displaying risk matrices, and a ceramic mug of black coffee, its steam the only chaotic element in the room. I was finalizing the data integrity slides for the 10:00 a.m. quarterly all-hands meeting. My job is not about morals. It is about metrics. It is about the quantifiable, auditable line between acceptable risk and actionable malfeasance. My world is one of regulations, digital paper trails, and the precise surgical removal of human error or human intent. A vibration, sharp and localized, buzzed against the composite desk, not my corporate device, which is set to a silent, escalating visual alert. This was my personal phone. I glanced at the screen, a notification from a group chat I kept muted, but whose overrides were set for 3 specific contacts. Group, family plus partners. The name itself was a conflict of interest, a blend of domesticity and LLCs that my father insisted upon. It was where my mother posted gala photos, and my father dropped passive-aggressive links to Forbes articles. The preview lit up. Mother, Action 14 May, a.m. Sloan, your father and I have discussed this at length. We think it's best you step away for now. A second message, a buffer of 3 milliseconds. Father, 6:14 a.m. For optics, to avoid scandal. I read the words, step away, a corporate euphemism for be invisible. Optics, my father's religion. Scandal, the leverage. My finger hovered. The scandal was attached. It wasn't a link. It was an image file, a high-resolution scan. I tapped it open. It was a check, dated 2 weeks ago, drawn from the Mercer Family Trust. Payable to the Glass House. Amount, $209,000. And in the memo line, my name, per Sloan Mercer. The image was clear enough to see the perforated edges and the magnetic ink of the account numbers. It was also clear enough to see the signature, a passable but tense forgery of my own. This was their move, a manufactured kill file, an accusation designed to shatter my credibility. Conflict of interest, the unwritten caption screamed. The Glass House was a vendor, a shell, I suspected, that Northvale was currently flagging in an internal review, a review I was leading. By planting this, they weren't just accusing me of self-dealing, they were accusing me of being sloppy. That was the real insult. I analyzed the image the way I would any piece of submitted evidence. The signature's ink pressure was too uniform, suggesting a digital composite rather than a wet ink original. The routing number was correct for the Trust's bank, but the check stock design was 2 years out of date. Amateurs. I stared at the accusation, feeling not anger, but a cold, clean wave of procedural certainty. They had just created a record. They had documented their own conspiracy. And then, the screen flickered, a new event in the chat. Aunt Celeste reacted to Mother's message. A single digital red heart. It was a bizarre, almost mocking gesture. A social media pleasantry dropped into an execution. A beat later, Aunt Celeste sent an attachment. Addendum, Coleman Trust, 2010 TIM. PDF. My pulse, usually a steady 60 BPM at rest, gave one hard, distinct kick. Celeste, the family's silent partner, the one who attended board meetings via speakerphone and read proxy statements like novels, the one who had watched me from the periphery my entire life. Coleman Trust, 2014. 11 years. I was 20, just starting to understand the numbers that didn't add up in the Mercer Hope charity ledgers. I had asked my grandmother, matriarch of the Coleman side, a single, hypothetical question about asset protection. She had smiled, and 2 weeks later, her lawyers had set up a trust. I was told it was for my education. I hadn't seen the governing document until now. I downloaded the PDF. The file was 1.2 MB. It was encrypted. My phone processed the biometric scan of my face and the file opened. It was not a trust. It was an arsenal. I looked up from the phone, past my reflection in the monitor, and through the wall of glass. Grayford was awake now. The sky was a flat, metallic gray, the color of an unformatted hard drive. 40 stories below, the ant-like flow of early commuters moved silently. The Northvale Tower, this massive pillar of steel and glass, was a physical ledger. Every floor was a line item. Sales, engineering, logistics, and here, on 31, compliance. We were the internal audit function, the check and balance. My parents saw this building as a backdrop for their philanthropic brand. They saw my job as a safe place for the daughter who was good with details. They had no concept of what my job actually was. They didn't understand that the entire building ran on the systems I managed, the access logs, the expense reports, the email retention policies. I wasn't just in the system. I was the system. And they had just tried to breach it. A new sound, the soft, polite ping of a high-priority calendar notification. My Outlook inbox, displayed on the left monitor. Sender, Board Secretary. Subject, Urgent. Board Review Meeting, Location, Boardroom 40A. Exec Telepresence, Time, 10:12 a.m. Attendees, Board Distribution List, Sloan Mercer, General Counsel. I smiled. A thin, cold smile that didn't touch my eyes. This was the meeting I had scheduled myself last Tuesday, under the vague but alarming header, Review of Internal Controls and Vendor Management. It was the trap I had been carefully baiting for 6 months, waiting for the right data point to spring it. My parents, in their 6:14 a.m. panic, thought they were preempting a scandal I had caused. They thought their fabricated check would force me to cancel this meeting, to resign in shame, to step away before I uncovered their vendor, the glass house. They didn't realize they had just delivered my final piece of evidence. They had provided the motive for the fraud I had already found. They had just confirmed who benefited. They thought this 10:12 a.m. meeting was about me. They had no idea it was for them. My movements were economical, precise. I placed my personal phone flat on the desk. On my work laptop, I hit the Party SEN key, the satisfying silent snap of a full-screen capture. I pasted the image into a blank, secured document. I captured the entire thread, my mother's words, my father's, the $209,000 image, Aunt Celeste's heart, and the PDF file icon. I drew a red 2-point width box around the entire exchange. File, save as. The encrypted, audit-only drive. K/compliance. Internal investigations. Case NV 2025 088/. File name, Exhibit A Chatlog 0615 PEF. I clicked Save. The file locked. Its hash value recorded in my master log. It was now part of the permanent, immutable corporate record. It was no longer a family disagreement. It was evidence. I picked up my personal phone. My thumbs were steady. The glass was cool. I opened the Family Plus Partners group chat. The thread waited, pulsing with their silent expectation of my collapse. I typed, Noted. A pause. Let them see the ellipses. Let them wonder if I was crying. Let them imagine me packing my desk. Then, I finished the sentence. I'll address this, in public. I hit send. The blue bubble appeared. The word delivered materialized beneath it. I closed the app. I muted the thread completely, removing all overrides. I picked up my coffee. It was still hot. I turned back to my monitors. The addendum from Aunt Celeste was open on one screen. The 10:11 a.m. board meeting agenda was on the other. I had 3 hours until the all-hands meeting, and just over 4 until I dismantled my family's reputation. I took a sip of coffee and got back to work on my slides. There was a process to follow, and I, Sloan Mercer, always follow the process. The delivered receipt of my reply sat in the Family Plus Partners chat. A single sterile gray word, 6:17 a.m. The silence in my office was absolute, broken only by the faint, high-frequency hum of the building's climate control, my world, and then the world of the group chat. The Family Plus Partners name was itself a branding exercise, a creation of my father's. It implied a seamless merger of personal warmth and financial success, the core tenet of the Mercer identity. In Grayford, the Mercer name wasn't just a name, it was a product. We were the entrepreneur-philanthropist family. You've seen us. You've seen my father, Graham Mercer, cutting the ribbon for the new wing of the Children's Hospital, his speechwriter having perfectly blended humility with authority. You've seen my mother, elegant in slate blue, chairing the Mercer Hope Charity Gala. Her smile practiced to convey exactly the right amount of compassionate concern. You've read the glossy features in the Grayford Gazette. The Mercers, building a better city, complete with photos of us at brunch, the sunlight artfully catching the crystal. Our family crest should have been a champagne flute crossed with a press release. My father's favorite topic, the one he deployed at every gala and every shareholder meeting, was ethical capitalism. He spoke about transparency and community responsibility with a sincerity that was so polished it was blinding. People believed him. He believed himself. And me? I was the prop. I was the bookkeeper. In the family photos that made the Gazette, I am invariably on the edge of the frame. If my parents are the central subjects, I am the soft-focus background element, usually holding my mother's embossed leather clutch or my father's extra program. My mother, in a moment of what she thought was kindness, once explained it to a photographer. "Oh, don't worry about Sloan. She hates the fuss. She's my practical one. All business." I was the one who balanced the checkbooks for the galas, who reconciled the donation receipts, who filed the tax paperwork. I was the structural support, buried in the foundation, essential but never meant to be seen. The brand required a polished facade, and I was the unglamorous, necessary spreadsheet. My father's entire worldview was built on one word, the word he used in his 6:14 a.m. text. Optics. That word was my lullaby. Growing up, optics governed every decision. We couldn't buy a slightly too foreign car. Optics Sloan were an American success story. We had to attend church every Sunday. Second pew from the front. It's about community presence. The optics are important. My father didn't ask, "Is this right?" He asked, "How will this look?" The 6:14 a.m. text, the fabricated check, the manufactured scandal. This wasn't a betrayal. It was the most purely Mercer thing my parents had ever done. They were managing my optics. But they forgot how I became the bookkeeper. It started when I was 20, home for the summer from my sophomore year at Wharton. I was interning at the Mercer Hope Charity. My father thought it was a good resume builder. "Learn the family business," he'd said, patting me on the shoulder. The family business, I discovered, was creative accounting. It was 2 a.m. The house was silent. I was in my father's home office, a room that smelled of aging leather and wood polish, working through the charity's quarterly expense reports in QuickBooks. It wasn't a complex system. It was designed for simplicity, not for scrutiny. But I found them. The adjusted invoices. A recurring vendor. Harbor and Slate Consultants. The invoices were vague. Event logistics, PR outreach, strategic advisement. The amounts were inconsistent, random seeming numbers. $12,500 one month, $19,200 the next. They totaled over $200,000 for the year. My pulse had quickened then, too. I ran a corporate search on Harbor and Slate. It was an LLC registered to a UPS store box address. The sole managing partner? Julian Cross. My father's brother-in-law, my uncle, a man our family always described, with pitying sighs, as struggling. The money wasn't just being diverted, it was being laundered, badly, through a relative's shell company, siphoned from donation funds meant for hospital equipment. I sat there, the glow of the monitor lighting my face. I felt a cold sickness. This wasn't an optic. This was fraud. I didn't confront them. What was the point? They would have called me naive. They would have called it complicated. They would have told me I didn't understand the pressure they were under. So I stayed silent. I closed QuickBooks. I went back to school in the fall and I changed my major. I added a specialization in forensic accounting and loaded my schedule with courses on corporate governance, internal controls, and Sarbanes-Oxley. I didn't want to win an argument at the dinner table. I wanted to build the prison. I graduated, top of my class. I bypassed the family business and went straight to the Big Four, spending years in auditing, learning the systems from the inside, and when I was ready, I took the job at Northvale Systems. Northvale was everything the Mercer Hope charity was not. It was a $50 billion publicly traded software corporation. It lived and died by SEC regulations, shareholder oversight, and data, cold, hard, immutable data. Data that couldn't be adjusted by my father's charm. Data that lived on redundant, encrypted servers. Data that did not lie. My mother had been so pleased. "Oh, Sloan," she'd said, patting my hand at a family dinner, the diamonds on her wrist cold against my skin. "Head of ethics. How? Noble. It's just perfect for you. All that lovely, quiet work. Honestly, you're just better suited for backstage." I smiled and nodded. "You're right, Mom. It's a good fit." I let her think my job was about writing employee handbooks. I never told her that backstage was where the real power was. The stage they lived on, the galas, the press, was a flimsy set. The backstage, my backstage, was the building's foundation. It was the access logs, the email retention policies, the vendor approval chains, and the anonymous whistleblower hotlines. My job wasn't to give speeches on ethics. My job was to enforce them. Which brought me to the last player, Aunt Celeste. My father's sister, the family ghost. Celeste had inherited her share of the original Mercer manufacturing wealth, but had zero interest in my father's empire of optics. She lived in Oregon. She never attended the galas. She was technically on the board of the Mercer Family Trust, the real money, not the charity, but she always voted by proxy. While my parents curated their image, Celeste curated her absence at the rare family holidays she attended. She was a quiet, unnerving presence. While my father held court, Celeste would sit by the fire, reading, listening. She didn't participate. She observed. Her silence was not passive. It was active. It was an audit. She was the only one in the family who looked at me not as a bookkeeper, but as a colleague. I looked at my phone. 6:21 a.m. The attachment. Addendum. Coleman Trust, 2014.pdf. The Coleman Trust, my grandmother's trust, the one she set up for me the summer I turned 20, the summer I discovered the invoices. I had met with my grandmother's lawyers just once. She had called it a rainy day fund. I remembered, now, Aunt Celeste had been at that meeting. She sat in the corner of the lawyer's mahogany-paneled office, not saying a word, just watching. For 11 years, I had suspected, I had hoped, I had built my career on the suspicion that my grandmother had seen the rot in her own son-in-law, and that she had forged a weapon for me. I suspected that Celeste was its guardian. Her red heart reaction to my mother's text was not an endorsement. It was a confirmation. It was the pulling of a trigger. I was right. I tapped the file, my credentials unlocking the encryption. The addendum was waiting, and at 10:12 a.m., I would be the one to read it into the record. I minimized the PDF from Aunt Celeste. That file was the shield. The legal authority I would need at 10:12 a.m. It was the how. But first, I had to dismantle the why. I reopened the image file they had sent at 6:14 a.m., the accusation they thought would break me. The JPEG of the $209,000 check. It was a declaration of war, packaged as a family concern. It was designed to do one thing: neutralize me by destroying my credibility. If the head of compliance is dirty, the entire compliance function is compromised. I looked at it not as a daughter, but as a forensic investigator. This was not a personal attack. It was a hostile document in a legal proceeding. My objective was simple: dismantle the fabrication, identify the true source, and flip the accusation before the 10:00 a.m. all-hands meeting. I began my process. First, the document itself. Payable to the Glass House, the exact vendor my team had flagged for irregular billing practices. Memo, per Sloan Mercer. A clumsy, direct attempt to pin the vendor relationship on me. Amount, $209,000. A number large enough to be material, small enough to be plausible. And the signature, a forgery of my name. My hands moved across the keyboard. I opened my digital workbench, a suite of forensic and analysis tools. I dragged the JPEG into my signature verification software. I pulled my specimen signature, the one on file with Northvale's corporate treasury, and overlaid it. The forgery was good, but not perfect. It was a digital composite. The S in Sloan was too perfectly rounded, lacking the slight upward drag of my real-time signature. The M in Mercer had uniform pixel density, showing it was traced or stamped, not written. A human hand, even with a stylus, applies variable pressure. This had none. It was a fake. That was easy. But proving the signature was fake wasn't enough. They would claim I was lying, that I was denying my own actions. I had to prove who did authorize the payment. The check was a fabrication, but the $209,000 was almost certainly a real transaction. The forgery was a cover story for a real crime. I opened the Northvale corporate banking portal. As head of compliance, I have read only access to the transaction APIs of all related executive accounts for oversight purposes. This includes the Mercer Family Trust, which my father had linked to the corporate profile for ease of managing philanthropic donations. His mistake, his arrogance. I ran a query, account number matching the one on the check. Search criteria: transactions over $200,000 in the last 30 days. One result. It was not a check, it was a wire transfer. Date, Sunday, October 19th. Time, 2:03:17 a.m. Amount, $209,000. Destination, the Glass House. They hadn't used a check. They had wired the money. Then, to frame me, they had created a check image, faked my signature, and sent it as proof. They were linking a real transaction to a fake authorization. Now, the final piece. A wire transfer authorized at 2:03 a.m. on a Sunday requires digital approval. That approval is logged. That log contains an IP address. I expanded the transaction details. Authorization: G. Mercer. Approval IP 72.44.13.19. My fingers froze for a second. G. Mercer. Graham Mercer. My father. I ran the IP address through our geolocation database. The result populated instantly. ISP, Comcast Cable, location, Grayford, 03890, registered owner, Mercer, Graham. It came from my parents' house. At 2:03 a.m. On a Sunday, my father wired $209,000 from the family trust to a shell vendor I was investigating, and at 6:14 a.m. on Monday, he and my mother sent me a forged check to blame me for it. They weren't just pushing me out, they were setting me up to take the fall for their own wire fraud. The air in my office felt sharp, crystalline. I wasn't angry. I was validated. The vague suspicions I'd had for 11 years just solidified into a felony. Now I would package it. I opened a new file in our data visualization software. I created a flowchart. It was the only thing I would show the board. It needed to be simple, clean, and devastating. A box on the left. Source, Mercer Family Trust. Account holder, Graham Mercer, Treasurer. A box on the right. Destination, the Glass House. Active NV vendor inquiry. A line between them. Wire transfer, $209,000. Below the line, I added the 2 key data points. Data point 1, authorization, time, 2:03 a.m., Sunday, user G. Mercer, IP 72.44, Mercer residence. Data point 2, cover-up, time, 6:14 a.m., Monday, action, family plus partners text, evidence, fabricated check image, Exhibit A, with forged signature, S. Sir. I drew one thick red arrow. It started at data point 1 and pointed directly to data point 2. Motive, action, cover-up. I saved the file as COM088 flowchart PDF and pinned it to my main monitor. Next, the process. This was the most important part. Evidence is useless without an unbroken chain of custody. A single misstep, a single file saved to the wrong drive, and they could claim I tampered with it. I created a new secure container on the compliance server. Case file, NV 2025-088, review of fiduciary duty and vendor conflict. I began to log the evidence, timestamping and hashing each file. Evidence 001, Exhibit A chat log, 0615 PDF, the 6:14 a.m. text thread, Evidence 002, fabricated check 209K, JPG, the image they sent. Evidence 003, KYC Record Mercer Trust, PDF, bank KIC document proving signatories are Graham and my mother, not me. Evidence 004, SIG analysis Mercer S PDF, the digital overlay proving forgery. Evidence 005, transaction log wire 2:03 a.m., DSV, the immutable bank log of the real wire transfer. Evidence 006, IP geolock 7244.1319.pdf, the IP trace. Evidence 007, case 088, flowchart, PDF, the summary indictment. I generated a master chain of custody manifest, digitally signed it with my corporate key, and timestamped it, 6:51 a.m. The trap was built. The evidence was secure. Now, it was time to alert the board. I opened a new, encrypted email. My fingers moved quickly. To Anya Sharma, General Counsel, Mark Riley, Lead Independent Director, Head of Internal Audit, Dana Whitlow, CC, Full Board of Directors Distribution List, PwC Independent Auditors, Partner List. The two-line was a tactical strike. It looped in legal, the board's independent leader, and our external auditors simultaneously. No one could bury this. No one could claim they didn't see it. It created immediate, system-wide accountability. BCC, none, ever. Subject, return it, in public. The body of the email was cold, formal, and precise. All attached. Please find a secure briefing packet, case NV 2025-088, for the 10:12 a.m. board review. In the course of my investigation into vendor The Glass House, I uncovered a material conflict of interest and a potential instance of wire fraud originating from the Mercer Family Trust, authorized by its treasurer, Graham Mercer. This morning at 6:14 a.m., I received a communication, See Exhibit A, containing fabricated financial documents, Exhibit B, which appear to be an attempt to frame me for this precise transaction and force my resignation. The attached packet contains a full analysis, transaction logs, IP traces, and a chain of custody for all evidence. The matter is critical and directly impacts the integrity of the company's internal controls and executive conduct. I will present my full findings at 10:12 a.m. as scheduled. Sloan Mercer, Head of Ethics and Compliance, Northvale Systems. I attach the zipped, encrypted container. Case NV 2C25-088, Board Briefing, Zip. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the moment, the click, the point of no return. I was no longer just defending myself. I was formally accusing my father, the man who paid for my education, of a federal crime, to his own colleagues. I clicked. The email vanished from my outbox. The server whirred, processing the send receipts. 6:55 a.m. I turned in my chair and looked at my calendar, displayed on the third monitor. My day was now set in stone. 10:12 a.m. All hands meeting. My speech on Integrity Week. 10:12 a.m. Board review meeting. The presentation of Case File 088. 10:30 a.m. The press embargo lifts. My parents thought they were setting the agenda. They didn't know I had set this timeline a week ago. Their 6:14 a.m. text wasn't an attack. It was a confession, and I had just logged it. My email to the board was gone, sent at 6:55 a.m. It was an irrevocable digital act. The case was no longer mine. It belonged to the company. Logged, time-stamped, and distributed. The air in my office felt thin. I turned my full attention to the file Aunt Celeste had sent. The 6:14 a.m. text message from my parents was the accusation, the file from my aunt as the judgment. It was waiting on my secure drive. Addendum, Coleman Trust, 2014.pdf. The red heart emoji she had used as a reaction to my mother's text was, I now understood, an act of supreme, cold irony. It was not a gesture of affection, it was a signal. It was the armed light on a control panel. It meant the primary condition had been met. This document was my grandmother's true legacy. Eleanor Coleman, my mother's mother. She was a woman who had built a container shipping empire with cash, steel, and a terrifying understanding of contract law. She wore pearls to board meetings and could eviscerate a CEO with a single, quietly phrased question about their debt ratios. She had always viewed my father, Graham Mercer, as a confection. All optics, no substance. When I was 20, the summer I found the first fraudulent invoices in the Mercer Hope charity, I hadn't told anyone, but Eleanor had summoned me to her study. She just watched me. I said nothing, but she saw it. She saw the moment I had stopped being a Mercer and started being her granddaughter. You're going to need your own tools, she had said. 2 weeks later, her lawyers finalized the Coleman Trust. She told me it was an educational fund, a rainy day provision. I opened the PDF. It was not a provision, it was a weapon. The language was not the soft, ambiguous phrasing of a family trust. It was the lethal, interlocking precision of a corporate takeover document. It was a 20-page legal trap, notarized, sealed, and waiting for a single, predictable act of self-preservation from my parents. I scrolled past the preamble, my eyes scanning for the operative clauses. I found them under Section 8, Fiduciary Oversight and Emergency Provisions. I read Clause 8b. My blood ran cold. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Sloan E. Mercer, is subjected to a verifiable attempt by any acting trustee of the Mercer Family Trust, defined herein as Graham Mercer or his spouse, to be isolated, removed, silenced, or otherwise stepped away. My breath hitched. The exact word from the 6:14 a.m. text. Stepped away for reasons pertaining to public perception, reputational management, or optics. She had put it in quotes. My grandmother had, 11 years ago, codified my father's favorite, hollow word. She had been listening to him, all those years, at all those performative family dinners. She had heard him. I continued reading. Then the standard governance of the Coleman Trust is immediately and automatically suspended. All voting rights, proxy controls, and executive authority held by the trust, including all held shares in Northvale Systems, shall be transferred, in full and with immediate emergency proxy, to the sole beneficiary, Sloan E. Mercer. This authority shall remain with the beneficiary for a period not to exceed 30 days, or until such time as the originating threat is deemed neutralized by an independent arbiter. I didn't know. I never knew. I scrolled, fast, to the asset schedule attached to the addendum. My educational fund was not just bonds and cash. It held a massive silent block of stock. 8% of Northvale Systems. My parents had no idea. They thought my grandmother's money was tied up in quiet, municipal bonds. For 11 years, Aunt Celeste, my father's sister, the family ghost, had been the proxy voter for that 8%. She was the one who always voted abstain on my father's proposed board compensation packages and yay on every increase to the internal audit budget. My parents, in their panic, thought they were exiling a problematic employee. With one text message, they had just handed their daughter an 8% voting block. They hadn't pushed me out. They had promoted me. I read on. The trap was deeper. Section 9. Activation of emergency powers. Clause 9.c. These emergency powers, refers Clause 8b, are irrevocably activated if the attempt at isolation is concurrent with, or facilitated by, the use of fabricated financial documents, forged signatures, or any other form of financial malfeasance intended to compel the beneficiary's silence or resignation. A perfect concentric interlocking killbox. The 6:14 a.m. text, with its fabricated $209,000 check, was the key. It triggered Clause 8 on B, and the forgery on that check triggered Clause 9.c. It was a complete, self-contained legal argument. At the bottom of the final page, the signatures, Eleanor Coleman, written in a bold, black slash, the notary's seal, embossed and dated, August 14th, 2014, and the witness, Celeste Mercer. Aunt Celeste hadn't just been in the room. She was the fail-safe. She was the guardian of the document, waiting for the inevitable day when my father's optics would finally collide with his fraud. Bundled with the PDF was a simple text file, no encryption, no formatting. I opened it. A single line. You'll need this at 10:12. Not if I needed it. Not for your information. It was a directive. You will need this. She knew. Of course she knew. She was on the board of directors' distribution list. She had seen my 6:55 a.m. email hit her inbox, the formal indictment. She had seen my case file ZO88. She had waited for me to build my own case, to find my own proof, before she handed me the gavel. I looked at the clock. 7:15 a.m. I had work to do. My movements were precise. First, I saved the addendum and the text note into the secure container. Case on NV 2025. I logged them. Evidence 008. Coleman Trust Addendum 2014 PDF Evidence 009. Instruction Note Siki Mercer. Text. Second, I composed a new email to the same distribution list as before. The board, legal, and our external auditors. Subject. Return it. In public. Body. All. Adding supplementary governance documents relevant to the 10:12 a.m. discussion. These files pertain to the Coleman Trust's voting block and its emergency proxy provisions, which have been activated this morning. See attached, SM. I attached the addendum. I hit send. The flare I had fired at 6:55 a.m. was now a burning magnesium fire. I stood. My charcoal gray suit jacket was on its hanger. I put it on. The wool was cool, structured. It settled on my shoulders like armor. The 10:02 a.m. all-hands meeting would be in the town hall, the glass atrium on the 28th floor. It was a stage. It would be broadcast to all 5,000 employees. My parents thought I would be running from it. I opened my desk drawer and took out the small, black box of my lavalier microphone, standard issue for department heads. I checked the battery pack, full. I clipped the mic to the inside of my lapel. running the thin wire under my shirt and securing the pack to my waistband. I looked at my reflection in the dark. Silent glass of my office. I was pale. My hair was in its usual, severe bun. My expression was neutral. I looked exactly like what I was, a compliance officer. I picked up my personal phone. I sent a new text, not to the group, but a direct, encrypted message to Aunt Celeste. It was one word. Ready. I set the phone on the cold composite desk. The 3 dots appeared. She was typing. A new message lit up the screen. It was not good luck. It was not, I'm proud of you. It was an order. Then make it clean. Make it clean. No emotion, no family baggage, no accusations, only findings, a clean, sterile, procedural excision. She wasn't just my aunt. She was my board member. I typed one word back, affirmative. I powered down my personal phone and dropped it into my locked desk drawer. From this moment, I was no longer Sloan Mercer. I was Northvale Systems. I looked out the window. The 7:30 a.m. sun was a weak disk behind the gathering gray clouds. A strong gust of wind, the leading edge of a storm, struck the 31st floor. The massive triple-paned glass didn't rattle, but it emitted a low, deep, vibrating thrum, a sound I felt in my feet. It was the sound of immense, contained pressure. It was the sound of the bell, just before it tolls. I picked up my corporate laptop. I had a presentation to give. At 9:57 a.m., I was backstage. Backstage at the Northvale Town Hall was not a traditional space. It was a 5-foot-wide carpeted alley behind the main holographic projection wall. Smelling of electronics and static, the town hall itself, our atrium on the 28th floor, was a cavern of steel and glass. It was 3 stories tall, designed to make employees feel small and the company feel vast. 500 people were packed into the tiered seating. The sales and marketing teams were in the front, overly caffeinated, talking loudly. The engineering and data science teams were in the back, hoods up, already looking at their laptops. The broadcast feed showed 4,500 other employees were tuning in remotely. I was not nervous. I was an executioner. And this was not a speech. It was a filing. Dominating the space, dominating the minds of everyone present, was the 40-foot, 8K LED wall. It was my father's pride. He had approved the $2 million expense himself, calling it a monument to our transparency. Right now, that monument was displaying the logo for Integrity Week. The font was a gentle, rounded sans serif. The colors were a soothing Northvale blue and a soft, optimistic gray. Below the logo, the slogan for the week, which my own team had been forced to create, pulsed slowly. Our code of conduct, the Northvale way. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. At 9:59 a.m., the VP of Communications, a woman named Sarah, tapped her own microphone. She was bright, bubbly, and completely unaware of the bomb I had placed in her inbox 3 hours ago. "Okay, everyone, let's settle down," she chirped. The room quieted. Welcome to the official kickoff of Integrity Week 2025. Polite, scattered applause. We have a fantastic week planned. Webinars on cybersecurity, new vendor protocols, and a keynote on ethics in AI. She smiled, reading from her card. But to start us off, please give a warm welcome to the woman who makes it all happen, our head of ethics and compliance, Sloan Mercer. More applause, warmer this time. I was respected, if not liked. I was the necessary, humorless friction that kept the company from grinding itself into lawsuits. I walked from the alley onto the stage. The lights were hot and white. My heels made a sharp, solitary click, click, click on the polished concrete stage. The sound was stark in the vast space. I clipped the battery pack of my pre-positioned lavalier mic to my waistband. I tapped the mic on my lapel. A hollow thump-thump echoed through the atrium. It was live. I stood at the center podium. I looked out. I could not see faces, only a vast sea of silhouettes, their faces lit by the blue glow of the Integrity Week logo behind me. Good morning. My voice was amplified, flat and cold. It held none of Sarah's warmth. The room fell silent. "This is Integrity Week," I began. I let the statement hang. "It's the week we talk about our shared values, about trust, about transparency." I paused, turning my head to look at the massive logo behind me. But values are abstract. Trust is an emotion. My job is not to manage abstracts. I turned back to the audience. I deal in controls, I deal in process, and I deal in proof. I pressed the first button on the simple black remote in my hand. The 40-foot Integrity Week logo did not fade. It snapped to black, plunging the room into momentary darkness. Then, just as fast, it snapped to a stark, blinding white. It was a screenshot, my screenshot, blown up to the size of a building. The title I had added at the top read, in simple, 48-point type, Exhibit A, Hostile Communication, 06:14 a.m. "Today," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "we are talking about controls." The sound started at the front, a low, confused murmur. People were leaning forward, squinting. They were reading. They saw the gray and blue bubbles of a smartphone text thread. They saw the time, 6:14 a.m. Then they saw the words, "Mother, we think it's best you step away for now. Father, for optics. Attachment. Check 209K, JPG." The murmur grew into a quiet roar, 1,000 whispers. Is that her family? What is that check?" People were looking from the screen, to me, and back to the screen. They were horrified. They were confused. They thought they were witnessing my public immolation. They thought this was my boss, forcing me out. "This is a screenshot from the Family Plus Partners group chat," I said, my voice overriding the noise. The room silenced again, instantly. "I received it this morning. It is a direct and coordinated attempt to force my resignation." I used the laser pointer in the remote. It was a small, sharp red dot, insignificant until it landed on the massive screen. It was sent to intimidate me, to force me to stop an investigation my team is conducting into a vendor named The Glass House. The red dot moved, circling the image of the $209,000 check. They included this fabricated check, with a forgery of my signature, to frame me for the very fraud I was investigating. The air was electric. This was not an HR presentation. This was a corporate thriller, and they were in the middle of it. "For the record," I continued, "I have redacted the names of all non-essential parties in this chat. Privacy, even for those attempting to suborn a corporate officer, is a right." The red dot moved. It landed on the sender of the For Optics message. But I have not redacted the role of the sender, because that role is a material fact. The laser circled the name in the chat log. It did not say father. It said, Family Treasurer. The Family Treasurer, as he is known in this chat, is a senior executive at this company. He is also the fiduciary manager of the Mercer Family Trust. A new sound, not a murmur, a sharp, collective inhalation. They were connecting the dots. Mercer, my name, his role. "The family treasurer sent this fabricated check to frame me," I said, my voice dropping, becoming colder. "But the problem with fraud is that it always leaves a trail, and the treasurer made a mistake." I clicked the remote. A new slide. Case file 088, transaction and log analysis. The screen was now split into 3. Panel 1. Bank portal, Mercer Trust. Panel 2. Internal server log, G. Mercer. Panel 3. Security feed, Mercer Garage. "The $209,000 payment was real," I narrated. "But it was not a check. It was a wire transfer, and it was not authorized by me. It was authorized by him." I pressed the play button. You are now watching a time-lapsed recording from this past Sunday. The timestamp is 2:02 a.m. On the screens, the video began. Panel 3, the garage cam, flickered to life as the light turned on. A man in a silk bathrobe, my father, walked into frame, his face puffy with sleep. He sat at the spare computer. At 2:03 a.m., I said, as the timestamp on panel 1 lit up. The user G. Mercer logged into the secure bank portal. The entire atrium watched my father's cursor move. We watched him click Initiate Wire Transfer. We watched him type the amount, $209,000. We watched him select the destination, the glass house. He clicked Confirm. The room was holding its breath. I could feel the pressurized silence of 500 people. At 2:04 a.m., I continued, the user G. Mercer accesses his user logs. On panel 2, we watched him find the transaction log. We watched him highlight the line item. We watched him click Delete. The log vanished. A common mistake, I said to the silent room. He deleted the portal log. He forgot the bank's immutable ledger, and most importantly, my voice was barely above a whisper, but the mic picked up every cold syllable. He forgot the camera in his own garage. I clicked the remote. The video stopped. A new slide appeared. It was a single, high-resolution still frame, a digital zoom-in from the garage camera. It was his hand, his left hand, resting on the mouse. And on his wrist, unmistakable, was the gold Patek Philippe with the midnight blue face, his 25-year service watch, the watch he was wearing in the lobby portrait. One floor below us, the optic he was most proud of. The sound that ripped through the atrium was not a gasp. It was a wave, a single, audible whoosh of 500 people inhaling at once. It was the sound of a vacuum being filled, the sound of a brand disintegrating. I let the image hang for 5 seconds, 5 seconds of my father's hand, his watch, and his crime. I clicked the remote. The 40-foot screen went black. I stood in the center of the stage, a single figure lit by a single spotlight. The room was so quiet, I could hear the building's ventilation system. This company, I said, my voice ringing in the darkness, has a zero-tolerance policy for fraud. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter what your last name is. I took one step forward, out of the main light. My predecessor believed sensitive matters should be handled quietly. Behind closed doors, he called it discretion. That policy ends today. I looked out at the dark, silent crowd. This is Integrity Week, and this is my doctrine. I paused. I let the silence stretch. We don't whisper about fraud. We document it. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy. It was the sound of 5,000 people recalculating their reality. I looked at the small digital clock on the back wall. 10:11 a.m. Thank you. That is all. I unclipped my mic pack. I set it on the podium, and as the VP of Communications stared at me, her face pale, her mouth open, I turned. I walked off the stage. Click, click, click on the concrete. I did not run. I did not slow down. I walked past the stunned faces in the front row and straight to the executive elevator bank. I pressed the button for the 40th floor. My board meeting started in less than 1 minute. The elevator doors opened onto the 40th floor at 10:12 a.m. The sound of the chime was heavy, absorbed instantly by the half-inch thick wool carpet and the acoustic-paneled, book-matched teak walls. The air here was different from the 28th floor. It was still, cold, and smelled of old leather and furniture polish. This was the executive boardroom. It was not a place for presentations. It was a place for decisions. I walked in. The room was a vault, 24 seats, only 9 of which were occupied. At the head of the massive, black granite table sat Mark Riley, our lead independent director. To his right, Anya Sharma, our general counsel. Her face a pale mask of legal containment. She was holding a stack of papers. They were my emails, printed out. The other 3 independent directors were present, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, a former senator, and the CEO of a robotics firm. They were not my father's friends. They were fiduciaries. They looked at me as I entered, their expressions unreadable, their eyes cold. They had all, undoubtedly, heard the sudden, shocking silence from the 5,000-employee all-hands meeting 12 floors below. The far wall was a seamless bank of 8K telepresence screens. Screen 1. Aunt Celeste. She had not activated her camera. It was just a black square with a name. C. Mercer. An audio-only presence, as usual. Screen 2. My father. His camera was on. He was in his home study, the one with the leather-bound books he'd never read. He was not wearing a suit. He was still in the silk bathrobe I had seen in the garage security feed. His face was a dark, congested red. He was staring at me, his mouth moving, but his microphone was muted. Screen 3. My mother. She was next to him, her hand gripping his arm. She looked like she had aged a decade since breakfast. She was staring at me, not with anger, but with a kind of baffled, horrified panic. I did not look at the screens. I looked at Mark Riley. Mr. Riley, Ms. Sharma, directors. Sloan, Mark said. His voice was a low gravel. You are present. Please, sit. He gestured not to the junior seats at the end, but to the seat directly across from him, the power seat. I walked, my heels silent on the thick carpet. I did not open a laptop. I placed 2 items on the polished black granite. The first was the printed, notarized original of the Coleman Trust Addendum, 2014. The second was my corporate access badge. Thank you for seeing me, I said. Anya Sharma spoke first, her voice the driest sound I had ever heard. The meeting is called to order at 10:12 a.m. The first item on the agenda is the matter raised by Ms. Mercer at 6:55 a.m. and the supplementary governance documents filed at 7:15 a.m. She held up her copy. I am holding the addendum, Coleman Trust, 2014. Our legal team has, in the past 3 hours, authenticated the signatures and the notary seal of Eleanor Coleman. This is a binding legal document. My father's audio feed clicked on. This is preposterous, he yelled, his voice tinny and distorted by the speakers. Anya, this is a family document. It has no bearing. Quiet, Graham. The voice came from screen 1. Aunt Celeste. It was flat, cold, and amplified. It cut my father's voice off as if a switch had been thrown. He went silent. Anya, Celeste continued, please read the operative clause into the record. Yes, Director Mercer, Anya said. She put on a pair of thin-rimmed glasses. She read, her voice a monotone, stripping the words of all drama, which only made them more devastating. Clause 8b. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Sloan E. Mercer, is subjected to a verifiable attempt by any acting trustee of the Mercer Family Trust to be isolated, silenced, or otherwise stepped away for reasons pertaining to public perception or optics. Anya paused and took a sip of water. The room was so quiet, I could hear the fan in the telepresence projector. She continued, then the standard governance of the Coleman Trust is immediately and automatically suspended. All voting rights, proxy controls, and executive authority held by the trust, including all held shares in Northvale Systems, shall be transferred, in full and with immediate emergency proxy, to the sole beneficiary, Sloan E. Mercer, for a period not to exceed 30 days. She looked up at the board. The shares held by the Coleman Trust total 8% of this company's outstanding stock. A visible shift in the room. The 3 independent directors, who had been looking at me as an employee, now looked at me as an owner. Anya finalized the statement. Furthermore, Clause 9.c activates these powers if the attempt at isolation is facilitated by fabricated financial documents. Based on the evidence packet, Case File 088, provided by Ms. Mercer, which includes the 6:14 a.m. text message and the forged check image. It is the legal opinion of this office that the conditions of Clause 8b and 9.c have been met. As of 6:14 a.m. today, the 8% voting proxy of the Coleman Trust is controlled exclusively by Sloan Mercer. Mark Riley nodded slowly. He looked at me. Ms. Mercer, you are now the second largest voting bloc in this room. The floor is yours. I stood. I did not look at the screens. I addressed the 3 physical directors. Thank you. I have 3 resolutions to propose, effective immediately. They are designed to protect this company from the material risks of fraud, brand degradation, and SEC penalties. I stated them clearly. Wendian, I move that this board formally request the immediate and indefinite suspension of Graham Mercer from his operational role as treasurer of the Mercer Hope Charity. Pending the results of an independent investigation, this action is to sever Northvale's brand from the entity used to commit the wire fraud detailed in Case File 088. 2. I move that this board retain an external, independent firm, I suggest Sullivan and Cromwell, who have no prior relationship with the Mercer family, to conduct a full forensic investigation into the glass house, all associated vendor contracts, and the complete financial records of the Mercer Hope Charity. 3. I move that Northvale Systems make immediate and voluntary disclosure of these findings to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the U.S. Attorney's Office. We will self-report this as an internal discovery and a failure of controls by a single executive, whom we have already suspended. I finished. We do this now. We control the narrative. We excise the problem. I call for a vote. Mark Riley looked down the table. A vote has been called on resolutions 1, 2, and 3. As a single package, we will vote by seniority. Director Mercer? The speakers crackled. Approve. Aunt Celeste's voice, clean, final. Mark looked at the former senator. The senator had spent his life managing public perception. He knew a fatal wound when he saw one. Approve. He looked at the tech CEO. She was a systems thinker. Approve. He looked at the venture capitalist. The VC's entire career was built on cutting losses. Approve. Mark Riley looked at me. As lead director, I also vote to approve. The resolutions pass, 5-0. No! The voice was a shriek. It was my mother. On screen 3. She had lunged forward, her face filling the camera. Mark, you can't. This is an ambush. Sloan. Look at me. This is family. The directors flinched. This was the one thing they feared. A messy, emotional, public family drama. I turned my head. I looked directly into the camera lens that was broadcasting my image to her. My voice was low, but the sensitive microphones picked up every word. That's why it's dangerous. I wasn't speaking to her. I was speaking to the board. I was answering their final, unspoken question. I was confirming that my family connection was not a conflict of interest. It was the entire reason I was the only person who could fix this, because I was immune to the one weapon they had. Anya Sharma muttered, "My God." Mark Riley picked up the small, ceremonial wooden gavel. He struck the granite table. The sound was a sharp, clean crack. It was final. The resolutions are binding. Graham Mercer is suspended. The investigation is approved. The disclosure will be made. He looked at me. His eyes filled with a new, weary respect. Ms. Mercer? Sloan, what is your next action? I remained standing. My authority as proxy voter was now established. The balance of power had shifted. I was no longer just the head of compliance. My next action, I said, is to manage the execution. Anya, you have the draft disclosure I sent. I want it filed with the SEC portal within the hour. Mr. Riley, you and I will co-sign the engagement letter for the investigative firm. I want them on site by tomorrow. I looked at the clock on the wall. 10:29 a.m. And finally, I said, the press, the story from the all hands is already spreading. We have less than 1 minute. I pulled out my work phone. I brought up the draft I had written at 6:30 a.m., when the adrenaline was high and my certainty was absolute. It was titled, Northvale Systems Self-Reports, Fiduciary Malfeasance, Suspends Executive, and Cooperates with Authorities. The communications team has this draft, I said. I am ordering its immediate release. Anya looked horrified. Sloan, that draft it's brutal. It is accurate, I replied. And it positions this company as the victim, not the perpetrator. We are the ones who discovered it. We are the ones who fixed it. Mark Riley nodded. He was exhausted. She's right. The brand is the priority. Save the company. He looked at me. Release it. I tapped my phone. Sent? At 10:30 a.m., as the first wave of employee text messages began to hit the local news desks, the official, documented, and legally vetted story hit the wire. Mark Riley hit the gavel again. This meeting is adjourned. The screens on the wall went black, severing the connection to my parents. The other directors stood, packing their briefcases, not speaking, avoiding eye contact with me. I did not move. I had just detonated my family. Now I had to manage the fallout. The executive boardroom was a tomb. The directors had filed out, leaving me alone at the granite table. The telepresence screens were black. My father and mother were gone, their digital connections severed. I did not pause. I did not reflect. I picked up my 2 items, the addendum and my badge, and walked out. I returned not to my office on the 31st floor, but to the compliance department's secure war room on the 29th, a windowless, temperature-controlled room with direct access terminals to our deepest data. The board meeting had been the legal decapitation. This was the autopsy. This was the part I had been waiting 11 years for. I sat at a terminal. My authorization was now absolute. The 6:55 a.m. email and the 10:12 a.m. vote had unlocked every door. I opened the accounts for the Mercer Hope charity. My father's philanthropic masterpiece, the brand builder, the charity we built on air. For 11 years, I had only been able to look at its public-facing tax filings. Now, I had root access to its private bank statements, its general ledger, and its vendor contracts. It was 10:45 a.m. I began the cross-reference. My first query: match all payments from Mercer Hope to the vendor Harbor and Slate Consultants. The result was immediate, 37 hits. I opened the log, a river of fraud. Transaction 001. Date 06/12/2020. Amount $12,500. Memo: PR Event Rentals. Transaction 002. Date 08/19/2020. Amount $19,200. Memo: PR Event Rentals. Transaction 037. Date 09/03/2025. Amount $22,000. Memo: PR Event Rentals. Total $841,000. Harbor and Slate. My uncle's shell company. The address on every invoice was a UPS store, but the service location listed in the contract was different. It was an address in rural Grayford. I ran the address through the county assessor's database. Owner: Mercer. Graham and mother's name. Property: the Mercer Lake House. For 5 years, my father had been paying his brother-in-law over $800,000 in tax-deductible charitable funds for the rental of his own weekend home. I saved the file. Exhibit C Harbor Slate Fraud, .pdf. Next, I searched the Mercer Hope payment history for the Glass House. 1 hit. Transaction 038. Date 10/19/2025. Amount $209,000 as dollars. Memo: per contract NVGH when fi. The $209,000. It wasn't just the trust, as I'd seen in Part 3. He had done it twice. He had wired $209K from the trust, and also paid $209K from the charity. Or perhaps he'd paid from the trust and used the charity funds to reimburse himself. It didn't matter. Both ledgers were now stained. The charity's books showed a $209,000 payment. I pulled the contract. NVGH when fine. It was an executive leadership summit for Mercer Hope Platinum donors. It detailed AV equipment, speaker fees, and leadership workbooks. It was a perfect, sterile, completely fictional document. I minimized the screen. I opened my personal cloud storage. Folder. Family. Subfolder. Mother's 60th birthday. Aug 2025. I had not wanted to go. My father had insisted. For optics, he'd said. I clicked through the photos, all of them professionally taken. My mother, laughing in a custom gold dress. My father, raising a toast. The room, filled with Grayford's elite. And then, I found it. A photo of my mother, hugging a guest. She is framed by a cascade of gold and white balloons. In the background, a mirrored column reflects the room. In that reflection, you can see the distinctive curved glass wall of the venue, the glass house, and in the corner of the reflection, clearly visible, is a 5-foot-tall ice sculpture of the number 60. The Executive Leadership Summit was my mother's birthday party. I saved the image file. Exhibit D Party Photo, JPG. I placed it side by side with the Leadership Summit invoice. This was the complete package: the Harbor and Slate fraud, the Glass House fraud, the evidence of fabrication. I composed a new email to Anya Sharma, our general counsel. Subject: FW for independent investigation, case 088. Body: Anya, please add these files to the brief for Sullivan and Cromwell. They detail parallel fraud within the Mercer Hope Charity. Exhibit C, log of 37 fraudulent payments to a shell entity owned by a family member, disguised as rentals for a property already owned by Graham Mercer. Exhibit DE, proof that the $209,000 Leadership Summit payment to the Glass House was, in fact, a personal birthday party. I have already taken action to wall off the funds. Sloan. I sent the package. Now for the final step, cleaning the ledger. The Coleman Trust Addendum, Clause 9.c, was now active. Activated when there is falsified financial evidence used to compel silence. My grandmother's words. It gave me emergency. Temporary signatory power over all assets linked to the fraud, including the Mercer Hope Charity Fund itself. I logged into the Mercer Hope bank account, this time as an administrator. I immediately executed a freeze on all outbound payments. Then, I began the reversal. First, I had to repay Northvale. My father had solicited corporate sponsorships from our own company for his sham charity. I ran the numbers. Over the past 5 years, Northvale Systems had donated $450,000 to the Mercer Hope Charity. I initiated a new wire transfer from Mercer Hope Charity to Northvale Systems corporate treasury amount, $1,450,000. Memo: repayment of all corporate donations, per order of the board. I clicked execute. The charity's primary bank account was now almost empty, but there was one more transaction to make. The $209,000 debt, the one from the family trust, from Part 3, the wire my father sent at 2:03 a.m. from his house, which he intended to frame me for. He had used the trust's money, but the reason he tried to frame me was because I was investigating the Glass House, the vendor he had also paid from the charity. It was all one big, tangled knot. I was about to cut it. I needed to create a clean, public record that acknowledged the trust's fraudulent payment, using the last of the charity's funds. I was linking the two fraudulent entities together for the investigators, burning the bridge between them. I initiated a second wire. From Mercer Hope Charity, Mercer Family Trust. Amount, $209,000. This was the reimbursement my father had likely intended to make to himself, a fraudulent payment from one pocket to another. But I was adding my own memo, a memo that would be logged on both bank servers, a memo that the external auditors would see, a memo that would be discoverable in any court. Memo: reversal of personal use. Raphael, the Glass House, G. Mercer, case 088. I hit execute. I had not recovered the money, I had simply moved it, but in doing so, I had signed my father's name to his crime. I had used his own dirty money to create a public, permanent confession. I closed the banking portal. The charity, for all its optics, was now just a shell, its accounts drained, its fraudulent transactions logged and tagged. It was no longer built on air, it was just a hole in the ground. The call came at 4:18 p.m. I was in the war room, finalizing the handoff protocols for the Sullivan and Cromwell auditors. My day had been a series of precise, escalating detonations. the 10:00 a.m. all hands, the 10:12 a.m. board execution, the 10:45 a.m. autopsy of the charity. The 10:30 a.m. press release had hit the wire like a controlled demolition, and my comms team was now in lockdown, fielding a tidal wave of inquiries, armed only with the single approved statement: Northvale Systems is cooperating fully with authorities. I was tired, not a physical exhaustion, but the deep, cellular weariness of a system that has been running at 150% capacity. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the cold, clear certainty of the procedures I had set in motion. My personal phone, which I'd retrieved from my desk drawer, vibrated against the table. I looked at the screen. "Mother?" Not a text, a call, her first of the day. I let it ring 3 times. I was formulating the response. "This line is not secure. Please have your legal counsel contact Anya Sharma." But I didn't. I pressed accept. I said nothing. Silence on the other end. Not a sob, not a scream, just the dead, pressurized air of a vacuum. Then, her voice. It was unrecognizable. All the bright, public-facing musicality was gone. It was flat, brittle, and low. "Sloan." I waited. "Your father and I are at the house, the old house. You need to come." It was not a request. It was not a plea. It was a summons from a queen who had not yet realized she'd been deposed. The old house was tactical, not the new, glass-walled trophy estate, but the 20-acre Grayford Manor we'd lived in before the Mercer brand went public. The place of supposed family, of memory, a place she thought I couldn't defile. "I have work to finish," I said. "Now, Sloan, you need to come now." The crack in her voice was not emotion. It was rage, compressed so tightly it was turning to glass. "I will be there in 30 minutes, I said, and hung up. I did not go alone. I forwarded my location and a 60-minute check-in timer to Anya Sharma. I did not know what they were capable of. Their optics were already destroyed. They were dangerous. I drove. The press release had frozen the stock, but the city was on fire. The local news helicopters were circling the Northvale Tower. My face, my 10:00 a.m. presentation, was everywhere. Northvale heiress ousts father in fraud scandal. I pulled through the original stone gates of the old house. I parked my gray sedan not by the main entrance, but by the service wing. I entered, as I always had, through the kitchen. It was vast, a cathedral of white marble and cold, stainless steel. It was designed for catering, not for cooking, and it was freezing. The lights were dimmed to a low, funereal level. It smelled of bleach and cold stone. They were there. My father was at the massive, 12-person marble island. He was not in his robe. He was in a crumpled, monogrammed dress shirt, the one he'd likely slept in. He was staring at his hands. He looked shrunken. The charisma, the booming presence, had collapsed, leaving only a pale, 60-year-old man. My mother was standing by the industrial-grade wolf range, rigid. Her spine was a steel rod. She was wearing a cashmere tracksuit, her arms crossed, her face a mask of sculpted fury. And in the shadows, by the pantry, a third figure, Aunt Celeste. She was here, in person. She must have taken the first flight from Oregon. She was wearing a simple black travel suit, her silver hair pulled back. She was not looking at her brother. She was looking at me. She was here to witness, to see the job through. I walked in. My footsteps were loud on the stone floor. I stopped, placing myself at the end of the island, a 10-foot expanse of polished marble between us. Silence. The only sound was the low hum of a sub-zero refrigerator. My mother spoke first. Her voice was a low hiss. "You humiliated us." She said it to the room, not to me. "You stood on that stage, in front of employees, in front of the world, and you broadcast it. You took our private family business, and you threw it to the dogs." I looked at her. Her face was contorted, not with grief, but with the profound, agonizing pain of social ruin. She wasn't angry that my father had stolen. She was angry that I had said he'd stolen. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the cold room. "I just read aloud what you wrote, Small." Her head snapped toward me. "What?" "You wrote it in a text message at 6:14 a.m. He wrote it in a bank ledger at 2:03 a.m. You just never expected anyone to read it. I read it. That's my job." My father's head came up. Slowly, his eyes were bloodshot. But they were not dead. They were sharp, and they were filled with a pure, acidic hatred. He didn't care about the humiliation. He cared about the how. "The paper," he rasped. His voice was raw. "The addendum. From Eleanor. From your grandmother." He spat her name like it was poison. "She's been dead for 11 years. Who gave it to you? Who gave you that paper?" He was looking for a conspirator. He was looking for someone else to blame. I did not answer him. I held his gaze. I let him see the cold, procedural emptiness in my eyes. Then, slowly, I turned my head. I looked across the vast, cold kitchen to the shadows by the pantry. I looked directly at Aunt Celeste. She did not move. She did not speak. She did not flinch. Her face was as neutral as a judge's. She simply met my gaze. She held it for 1, 2, 3 seconds. And then, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. A confirmation, an admission, the final, silent signal of her allegiance. My father saw it. He followed my gaze. He saw the nod. He made a sound, a strangled, choking gasp. "Celeste," he whispered. "You, my own sister, you did this?" Aunt Celeste remained silent. She was just an observer. "It doesn't matter who gave it to me," I said, turning back to my father. "It only matters that it's legal. You seem to be operating under the assumption that this is a family meeting, that you called me here to— What? Scold me? Negotiate?" I placed my Northvale corporate phone on the white marble island. "It is not a family meeting, it is a legal notification." I tapped the screen. Hitting the pre-dialed conference number, I pressed speaker. The phone chirped, and then a voice filled the kitchen, a voice as dry and sterile as the room itself. "I am here, Ms. Mercer, as requested. Anya Sharma, General Counsel for Northvale Systems." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. A small, muffled sound escaped. My father, who had started to rise, froze. The sound of the company's chief lawyer, being piped into their private, protected kitchen, was a violation they could not comprehend. It was the sound of the outside wall being breached. "Anya," I said, my voice all business. "Thank you for joining. Could you please confirm for the suspended parties the board resolutions that were passed unanimously this morning at 10:12 a.m.? "Of course," Anya's disembodied voice replied. "Per the official, notarized minutes of the emergency board meeting. Resolution 1. The immediate and indefinite suspension of Graham Mercer from all duties, titles, and fiduciary responsibilities at Northvale Systems and all associated entities, pending investigation." My father gripped the edge of the marble island. His knuckles were white. Resolution 2. The engagement of the external, independent firm Sullivan and Cromwell to conduct a full, unrestricted forensic audit of all accounts managed by Graham Mercer, including but not limited to the Mercer Family Trust and the Mercer Hope Charity. Resolution 3. The board's unanimous vote to make full, voluntary disclosure to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the U.S. Attorney's Office regarding case file 088. Anya's voice was relentless. Resolution 4. The board's confirmation of the activation of the Coleman Trust Addendum, recognizing Sloan Mercer as the sole proxy voter for the 8% block for the next 30 days. "That's enough, Anya," I said. "Thank you." "Of course, I will await your signal." I disconnected. The silence that rushed back in was heavier this time. It was the silence of a tomb. "You called this meeting," I said to my mother, "but I brought the agenda." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a large, 9x12 white envelope. I slid it across the marble. It stopped, perfectly centered. in front of my father. It made a soft, heavy thud. "This is for you, your copy." My mother looked at it, her eyes wide. What is it?" "It's a copy of the official, signed board minutes," I said. I reached in and pulled out a second document. I slid it next to the first. "This is the legal notice of the asset freeze on the Mercer Hope charity. Per Clause 9.c, the accounts are frozen. The $1.45 million in corporate funds have been returned to Northvale. The $209,000 has been reversed. The charity is insolvent." I pulled out a third, final stack of papers. "And this is a formal invitation to cooperate with the independent investigation. It details the time and location of your interviews, which begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you attend, with your own lawyers." My father just stared at the papers, his empire, his optics, his entire life's work, reduced to 3 packets of paper on his kitchen island. My mother finally broke, the rage, the ice, all of it cracked, her face crumpled, and she looked at me with a desperate, naked plea. The performance was gone. This was real. "Sloan, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "After all this, after everything, what do you want?" She was still negotiating. She still thought this was a transaction. "The house? Do you want the house? Do you want my seat on the museum board? What is it? What do you want?" I looked at her, at this woman who believed everything, even destruction, had a price. I said the line, "Nothing you own." I let the words hang in the sterile air. "Just what you took, your silence." She stared, uncomprehending. She didn't understand. She thought I was speaking in riddles. I didn't care. I was done. There was nothing left to say. I turned my back on them. I walked to the small, cluttered service desk by the kitchen's back door, the family desk. I pulled a single, small key from my pocket, the key to the Mercer Hope charity storage unit, where they kept the gala banners and the old, plastic donor plaques. It was useless now. I placed it on the desk. As I did, my hand brushed another object. My father's Northvale Systems corporate phone. He must have left it here this morning, in his blind 6:14 a.m. Panic, the device I had tracked, the device from which he had sent the 4 optics text. I heard my mother whisper my name. "Sloan?" I didn't turn. I picked up his work phone. It was heavy, black, silent. I placed it on the desk, next to the useless charity key. Then I turned. I looked at my father, who was still frozen at the island, staring at the documents. "You won't be needing this anymore." I turned my back on all of them, on my father, the criminal, on my mother, the enabler. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not look at Aunt Celeste. I didn't need to. I heard the heavy glass service door slide shut behind me, the click of the lock seating into place. The sound was final. By 6 p.m., the Northvale Town Hall was unrecognizable. At 10:00 a.m., it had been a corporate meeting. At 6:00 p.m., it was a press conference, a courtroom, and a public execution, all rolled into one. The atmosphere was thick, charged with the ozone smell of hot television lights and the palpable, hungry tension of the media. The entire local and national business press was here. The first 4 rows, once occupied by my sales team, were now a dense forest of cameras, microphones, and glaring white lights, all aimed at the empty podium. Behind them, the remaining seats were filled with shell-shocked Northvale employees, city officials, and legal observers. They were not here for a presentation. They were here for the final act. I stood in the same backstage alley, the sound of the room a low, animalistic roar, 100 voices, all speculating, all shouting into phones. "She's coming out. Stand by. Are the federal marshals here? Just get a shot of her face. Any shot." Anya Sharma stood with me, her face pale. "Sloan," she whispered, her voice tight. "You don't have to do this. I can read the statement. You've done enough." I looked at her. "They didn't see you at 10 a.m., Anya. They saw me. I started this. I have to finish it. I looked at the thin white envelope in my hand. It contained 2 items, a single-page statement, and a check. The VP of Communications, Sarah, who looked like she had been crying for 8 hours, stepped to the podium. Her voice trembled. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, employees, we will begin. Please, please, no shouting." She gestured to me. "Miss Sloane Mercer." I walked out. The sound was not a murmur. It was an explosion, a solid, concussive wall of light and noise. Hundreds of camera flashes firing at once, a blinding, violent strobe effect that turned the entire atrium into a series of fractured, overexposed still frames. The rapid, percussive click, 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 click of DSLR shutters sounded like a hailstorm on a tin roof. I did not shield my eyes. I did not flinch. I walked alone. My footsteps, the same click, click, click on the concrete, were inaudible under the roar. I was the target. I was the story. I reached the podium. The noise did not die. It intensified. Reporters were shouting my name. "Sloane, is your father under arrest? Who else is involved? Is the whole company fraudulent?" I stood for a full 30 seconds, saying nothing. I looked at them. I let the chaos peak. Let them exhaust their first, frantic wave. Slowly, the shouting subsided, replaced by the relentless, violent percussion of the cameras. I leaned into the microphone. "Good evening." My voice, amplified and cold, sliced through the noise. The room fell into a tense, expectant silence, broken only by the cameras. I slid the single-page statement from the envelope. "At 10:03 a.m. in this room," I began, my voice steady, "I presented the findings of an internal compliance investigation to the employees of Northvale Systems. The flashes were a constant, blinding pulse. I did not blink. Those findings confirmed multiple material violations of our corporate code of conduct by a senior executive. These violations include, but are not limited to, fiduciary malfeasance, the authorization of fraudulent wire transfers to an unapproved vendor, and the use of corporate funds for personal enrichment, concealed through the Mercer Hope charity." A collective gasp from the press. I had just confirmed it all, on the record. "I am here to announce the corrective actions taken by the Northvale Systems Board of Directors, as of 10:12 a.m. this morning." I read the list like an indictment. 1. The executive in question, Graham Mercer, has been suspended indefinitely from all roles, titles, and fiduciary duties, pending a full external investigation. 2. The board has retained the independent firm of Sullivan and Cromwell to conduct an unrestricted top-to-bottom forensic audit of the Mercer Hope charity and all associated accounts. 3. This company has, as of 10:30 a.m., made a full, voluntary disclosure of these findings to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the U.N.'s Attorney's Office for the Southern District. The room was electric. This was blood in the water. Northvale Systems is positioned as the primary victim of this executive's actions, and we are cooperating fully with all authorities. We will be transparent, we will be thorough, and we will be relentless in restoring the integrity of our controls. I finished reading the page. I folded it. The formal part was over. Now, the personal part. "The investigation," I continued, my voice losing its formal, legal tone and becoming something colder, "was precipitated by a fraudulent wire transfer for $209,000. This transfer was the subject of the 10:00 a.m. presentation." I reached back into the thin, white envelope. I pulled out the second item. A check. It was not the forged image from the 6:14 a.m. text. This was a new check, a cashier's check, drawn from the Coleman Trust, drawn from my grandmother's money, my money. I held it up for the cameras to see. "This is a check for $209,000, I announced. "It was deposited into the Northvale Systems corporate treasury at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon." I placed it, face up, on the podium. The cameras surged, a wave of lenses trying to capture the image. The fraudulent debt has been repaid, in public. The click, click, click of the cameras was the only sound. And then I pressed the remote. The 40-foot screen behind me, which had been dark, snapped to life. It was not a complex flowchart. It was not a legal document. It was Exhibit A. It was the 6:14 a.m. text message, blown up to the size of a billboard. The words were a monument, hanging in the air above my head. "We think it's best you step away for now." A massive, collective, audible gasp filled the room. The press, the employees, they finally saw it. The motive, the threat, the repayment, the entire narrative, in one image. I turned from the podium. I faced the cameras, my body rigid, my face set. The text message was my backdrop. I looked directly into the central lens of the main broadcast camera. I was not speaking to the room. I was speaking to the city. I was speaking to the record. "I agree," I said, my voice echoing in the vast, silent hall. I let the words hang. "From now on, I'm stepping away." I paused. The camera zoomed, sensing the final line. "From secrets." A beat of pure, absolute silence. The camera flashes stopped. The entire room, the entire city, held its breath. Then, the applause started. It was not the thunderous, chaotic explosion I had expected. It was not a standing ovation. It started in the back, where the engineers and the compliance team were standing. It was a single, rhythmic clap, then another, then 10, then 100. It rolled forward, through the employees, through the observers, a steady, building, unstoppable wave of sound. It was not loud, it was not celebratory, it was deep, and it was rhythmic, and it was long. It was the sound of respect. It was the sound of a new foundation settling into place. It was, as I had hoped, a single, sustained exclamation point. I looked up, past the blinding lights, to the very back of the atrium, in the shadows, by the main doors. A figure was standing. Aunt Celeste. She was not on a screen. She was here. She had watched the entire thing. Our eyes met across the vast, noisy room. The applause was still rolling, a steady, powerful tide. She did not clap. She did not smile. She simply raised her right hand, slowly, and placed it flat over her own heart. A real physical final gesture. The case was closed. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply held her gaze. I turned back to the podium. Ignoring the fresh wave of shouted questions, I stepped back, turned, and walked off the stage, disappearing into the darkness of the backstage alley as the applause finally, steadily, began to fade. It was 8:00 p.m. The 31st floor was a ghost ship, the energy of the day, the 6:14 a.m. text, the 10:00 a.m. all hands, the 10:12 a.m. board meeting, the 4:18 p.m. kitchen confrontation, the 6 p.m. press conference, had finally, totally dissipated. It left a vacuum in its wake, a pressurized silence that was heavier than any sound. My team had gone home hours ago, under strict orders from me to say nothing, log off, and decompress. They had done their jobs. They had provided the data. I had pulled the trigger. I was alone in my glass office, the lights off. The only illumination came from the vast, glittering darkness of the Grayford skyline outside, and the cool, white glow of my center monitor. My work was done, but the process required a final entry. I opened a new, encrypted email. To Mark Riley, Lead Independent Director, Anya Sharma, General Counsel, Board Distribution List. Subject, EOD Report. Corrective actions complete. Case NV 225088. I typed. All. This email is to confirm that all primary corrective actions resolved by the board at 10:12 a.m. today are complete. Sullivan and Cromwell have been formally retained. Their engagement letter is signed, co-signed by myself and Director Riley. They will be on site at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. The $1,450,000 in donations from Northvale Systems to the Mercer Hope Charity has been successfully clawed back and is in the Northvale Treasury. The $209,000 fraudulent wire payment has been publicly and privately reconciled via the Coleman Trust. All system-wide access for Graham Mercer has been revoked. All corporate assets, including his phone, have been secured. The Mercer Hope Charity and all related entities have been isolated from the Northvale network and are pending the external audit. The situation is contained. I await the findings of the external investigation and will provide full support. Sloan Mercer, Head of Ethics and Compliance Proxy, Coleman Trust. I hit send. It was 8:03 p.m. A near-instant reply pinged my inbox. From Anya Sharma. Subject: EOD report. The body was short. Sloan, I've received digital acknowledgement from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have the complete file, including the video exhibit from the all hands. They request a formal, in-person briefing from you on Wednesday. Aunt Celeste also provided a full, voluntary statement to my team this afternoon. It corroborates your timeline from 2014 to today. It's done. Get some rest. I closed the email. It was done. The legal machinery was now turning on its own. It no longer needed me to push it. It would just run. I leaned back in my chair. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a deep, hollow ache in my bones. I picked up my personal phone, the one I had used to text Ready to Celeste. I opened the Family Plus Partners group chat. The screen was a digital wasteland. The thread was empty, save for my own. Final message sent at 6:15 a.m. this morning. Sloan Mercer. Noted. I'll address this in public. There were no new messages, no angry refutations, no desperate pleas, no cries of, "How could you?" Just silence. But beneath my 6:15 a.m. text, there was a row of tiny gray words. Seen by mother, seen by father, seen by uncle. They had all seen it. They had seen it hours ago. Likely just after the 10:30 a.m. press release. They had read my declaration of war, and they had no response. Their entire brand, their empire of optics, their entire lives built on galas and speeches and carefully crafted images, all of it, undone by a data log and a video file. And their only reply was the digital equivalent of a muted shrug. Seen. It was the most honest, the most accurate, the most pathetic word they had ever spoken. I looked at the 6:14 a.m. text from my mother, still hanging at the top of the thread. We think it's best you step away for now. I smiled, a thin, cold, tired smile. I typed one final message into the thread, a message that would be delivered to phones that were likely already sitting in evidence bags. Stepping away, as requested, I hit send. The blue bubble appeared. I did not wait for the scene receipt. I tapped the name of the group chat. I scrolled to the bottom of the member list. I pressed the red button. Leave group? A prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to leave Family Plus Partners? I pressed leave. The thread, the history, the 6:14 a.m. text, the $209,000 fake check, it all vanished from my screen. I powered down my personal phone and dropped it into my briefcase. I stood. My suit jacket was still draped on the back of my chair. I didn't put it on. I looked around the office. It was sterile, functional. There were no photos, no personal mementos. There was nothing here to pack. My parents had threatened me with exile. They thought they could strip me of my inheritance, of my name, of my future. They thought I was like them. They thought I valued what they valued. I didn't take the house. I never wanted it. I didn't take the car. It was a lease. I didn't take the art from the walls, or the seat on the museum board, or the membership to the Grayford Country Club. I didn't take the Mercer name. I just kept it, and I gave it a new definition. I only kept one thing, the one thing they had tried to buy for $209,000, my silence. No, not my silence, my right to tell my own story. I picked up my briefcase. I walked out of my office. The light clicked off, plunging the room into darkness. I walked across the vast, empty 31st floor lobby. I stood at the main glass doors, looking out over the city. My reflection stared back at me, a solitary figure in a white shirt, silhouetted against the glittering darkness of the skyline. I looked tired. I looked free. I pushed the heavy glass door. As I stepped out into the 31st floor elevator bay, the main lights in the Northvale Tower lobby, far below, began to shut down. One by one, the massive, bright panels that had illuminated Integrity Week went dark. The building was switching to its night mode. The performance was over. The scene stopped. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'd love to chat and share our thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And if you enjoyed this, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.